Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss some of the latest revelations and bizarre ramblings about and from Donald Trump as Americans gear up for the final weeks of the presidential campaign, and even for someone who pays close attention to the kindergarten chaos that is British politics, what's happening in the United States is just off the chart. I know that the presidential race is going to be close. I know that it was always going to be close. But even given the ridiculous electoral college system, what I don't know is why. And so I'm now starting to think to myself, is it as close as the polls would suggest? But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So to someone like me, Donald Trump is clearly unfit for any office. In fact, his more recent and very obvious cognitive decline is just the cherry on top of his unsuitability. Whether on competence, on emotional stability, or even on motivational grounds, there's nothing to be said in favour of the orange one. He won't help the American people. He doesn't want to help the American people. But I also appreciate that some people have a view of politics which glosses over some of his obvious drawbacks. They believe, well, he's going to do the things which they think most need doing, so they will support him because Kamala Harris is sure as hell not going to do those things, right? Well, yes, on the part of those with an extreme view of politics. We have that here in the UK. You see it in other countries with democratic systems of government as well. There are people who have a view of politics that's going to go, well, this is my person. This is the one that's going to deliver some of what I want, hopefully all of what I want. So I will back them no matter what, right? Anything else is just, it's something I can easily live with. But governments change all the time. But those with those extreme political views tend not to change their vote very much because there is always just like one obvious standout choice for them. We know that elections essentially hinge on non-partisan swing voters. Those who don't get too deep into the philosophy, who don't align personally with a tribe. They just vote for what they think is the best or maybe least bad option, and they'll quite happily change that vote from one election to the next. Last year, I remember seeing a steady stream of what Trump was saying on Truth Social being reported elsewhere, and I just thought, yeah, when ordinary voters see this, they're going to think to themselves, can we not go back to this? Now, of course, there was always a possibility that Trump would have changed his pitch for the wider audience, and that most of those non-political voters wouldn't actually see all this stuff on Truth Social. But I also saw him only having really one speed. He's got one setting, Trump, level 11 crazy, right? Only he's added another ingredient now into the mix, that of grandpa losing his marbles. You'll listen to the random rambling of a senior citizen in their declining years in the nursing home, and you do that because it's just kind and you want to listen to them. But this guy's doing the same thing in speeches as he's asking people to let him run the most powerful country in the world. And you think, what is this? And you see this in every speech now. And then Americans are also hearing about some of the things that he got up to as president last time. With the disaster in Florida, people who worked with Trump have been explaining how when he was president, he refused to authorize relief for natural disasters in states which didn't vote for him in 2016. He literally let Americans die and refused them aid because he was butthurt that he didn't get 100% of the electoral college votes. They didn't vote for me, so they're not having any help. That was his attitude. And, a president who behaves in such a vindictive way into his own people is utterly ridiculous. And we also learned this week that he sent COVID tests to Russia whilst there was a shortage in the United States. So let's tie those two little statements together, shall we? So Trump doesn't help places suffering natural disasters who didn't help him to become president. Trump helps Russia at the expense of America during a natural disaster. It's also been revealed that Trump has spoken multiple times with Putin since stepping down as president including during a period when he was lobbying Republicans to block military aid to Ukraine. Speaking of which, some of those Republicans are now joking that Florida should change its name to Ukraine so they can get the same aid. And everyone with a brain has basically gone, okay, but we're not quite sure how you're going to stop a hurricane with howitzers. Not that it would surprise me if some of these morons thought shooting at a storm would somehow scare it off. It's like their answer to almost everything, isn't it? And where guns aren't the answer, it appears full frontal lobotomies deal with everything else. Jesse Waters on Fox News, he said that a man voting for a woman is childish. He goes further. He says that scientists say that when a man votes for a woman, he transitions into a woman. That's a quote. That's what he said. Now, okay, I'm guessing he's one of the enlightened ones on Fox because he's actually accepting gender fluidity here. But how is anyone supposed to actually believe that? Because there are lies in politics, right? There are lies in politics which are relatively easily debunked when you listen to actual experts. But you can also see how they would be convincing for many people who aren't going to fact check them. They're not going to go to that effort. And if the media don't do their jobs properly, as they very often don't in the UK or the US, then you can see how some lies are going to be convincing. How does this lie work? Like, did a quarter of voters in 2016 transition because they were men who voted for Clinton? I'm pretty sure that would have been newsworthy. And I saw no mention of it at the time. And I read reports that remind us that Harris has a slight lead in the national polls, but it's too close to call in the swing states, which are the ones that matter. And I sort of get that this is inevitable, and I understand that this is how it was always set up to be. What I can't understand is how. And I'll tell you what I'm hoping. I'll certainly tell you what I'm thinking at the moment. I am wondering if the polling in America isn't taking proper account of non-partisan swing voters because maybe they're not really engaging in the political polling. You know, people who engage in a political poll are the ones who are interested enough to want to do that, or at least agreed to do that. And I am thinking, is this now, this might be a realistic prospect, by the way, because polling works on the basis of, you know, people's voting behaviour being modelled on past voting behaviour, not necessarily the way they vote, but the factors that influence the way they voted. You know, this election is like no other. You know, you've actually got committed Republicans saying that they're going to vote for Harris. They're organised. There's organised Republican groups saying we need to vote for Harris because this election is not Republicans against Democrats. It's Trump against democracy. Trump himself is not behaving like a presidential candidate either, even by the standards of his 2016 version. You know, I'm absolutely clinging on to the notion that polls, which, like I say, they have to model voter behaviour based on past behaviour, may be unable to take account of the very different factors at play at this election and the very different attitudes that those non-partisan swing voters may have. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe the results aren't as close as currently predicted, because if this isn't the case, I really don't know what to say. I know we can't exactly point fingers in the UK, because I remember Boris Johnson fumbling his notes and trying to explain how Peppa Pig was a great model for businesses one time. And he still had all his marbles, or the ones he's ever had in the first place anyway. And some of the absolute bollocks that our culture warriors in this country come up with, it's embarrassing. But even Boris Johnson lost public support when his duplicity and, frankly, incompetence was exposed. His tribal loyalty was shown to be nowhere near enough to win an election. It was never going to be anything close to half the electorate. So he was binned. Boris Johnson was happily dropped by his party because he couldn't muster the popular support necessary to sustain him when he shit the bed. Something very different going on in America. You know, Trump's cult is ridiculously powerful. It's insane. It's actually insane that Republicans are made him their candidate again. Like, I really don't understand why they did that. Because they actually could be beating the Democrats quite convincingly at this point had they opted for someone who could at least stick to a script. Should we put it this way? At the very least, the Democrats would have to be massively upping their game. And what Trump is aiming to do with the second term is actually pretty close to what the Conservatives put in their manifesto in 2019, and they had the majority to do it. They were going to be removing an awful lot of democratic norms, and although they instigated a few, it was nothing like what they promised. And sure, okay, Orange Grandpa's version is more extreme, but his puppet masters may find that it's not easy to implement batshit ideas. It's certainly not as easy to implement them as it is to come up with them. And they may also find that once Americans see him in full flow, because at the moment he's trying to win an election. When he's won that election, as he's made clear over the last year or so, he's going to be in full vengeance mode against anyone he thinks has slighted him. And when Americans see this, they may find that there's actually a great deal more resistance to what he tries to do or what his puppet masters try to do. You know, and if Trump does manage to abolish democracy in any serious form, then you think to yourself, so then of what use would the Republican Party be to him? Just on every level, I cannot understand. I can't understand what led Republicans to allow this to happen. And unless the polls are getting it wrong, which is possible, I cannot understand ordinary Americans looking at this shit show and going, oh no, I've only got a couple of weeks to make my mind up, as if there is a choice to be thinking about. But there we are. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.